We released a new skin pack for Venge.io, and this weapon has a custom shader on it, and I will share the process of making this custom shader. Okay, first of all, make sure that you disable those two settings in import asset tasks area because we need to upload models in model entity because the plugin only works with that thing. If you do it with render component, it won't work. Anyways, just drag and drop the model and place it however you want to basically inspect it, and then make sure you can actually see it properly. This is what I'm doing right now, basically. Anyways, whenever you have a nice view, basically attach the material shader script to it. You can find it from GitHub. I'll share the link of it. And then create a material for it. You can basically call anything material. And attach this material onto the script. Also make sure this material is attached on model as well. And to just, you can do this as a fallback, which is basically setting its default texture to the material. So whenever the shader doesn't work, it's basically at least user can see the default texture of it. And whenever you have that base, refresh the page, you will see a green color there because the shader script basically overrides the material. And now what I do is basically set two textures what I will be using on the shader. One of them is the texture itself and the other one is Perlin noise. And if you just like modify the shader like I do here, I basically set the material with that way. Whenever you do that, it will basically show it properly. And whenever you have the shader code, you can basically copy it from the launch scene and put it to the editor itself. Now I'll go into the details of shader, how you can actually write it, how you can design a displacement. So here I'm actually creating a displacement map. You can do this on Photoshop basically and paint the areas you want to warp in the shader. Basically set any color like I'm using red in this example and save the texture, and then upload this texture to the PlayCanvas editor and create another texture area layer like this and drag and drop this displacement map to the shader. And whenever you have the shader texture there, you can basically copy that line and call it any variable like displacement and use the texture name displacement map in that case. And then you can basically use this texture to wrap UV map. So in this case, what I do is basically get R and G layers, which is basically red and green, and I just basically play with the numbers to see how wrapping the UV works, and I copy that shader time to time. So I have it on the plugin itself, and there's this curve system I have in the plugin, which you can basically create different type of curves, and then you can use those variables on the shader as well as a vector. So in this case, I have this curve, for example, and I'm just basically adding that to the shader code, and then I basically go to the editor. I open two sequence side by side so I can basically modify the curve real time and see the changes. So I would like to have some sort of eye movement on the displacement map, and what I do is basically play with the x and y variables to get some sort of eye movement kind of feeling basically. And if you notice, this is basically a simple trick where you have a time there and the curve actually provides certain values for the displacement map. What I do is basically multiply that value with the displacement map for our channel, and then basically wrap the UV map basically, because like here in In texture, I have UV variable, which is like the UV map coordinates, but then I basically modify those UV map coordinates with the displacement map in order to create a warp effect. This is how basically it works. Now I will do the same thing for another part of the weapon. This time I will use green color, so it's a little bit different than the other one. This time I can use G channel instead of R channel on the texture. Now save this, basically the same file, and replace the file again on the PlayCanvas. And now I create another code for it, and this time I will use Perlin noise, and I will modify Perlin noise texture with timestamp, and timestamp variable is in the shader tool as well. You can basically change the offset of UV map with this thing, where you can create a vector and put timestamp variable in it, and then basically move the offset and tile it, or just move it in with positions. So right now at this point I use Perlin noises art channel. Since like it's moving, we can use this art channel for that part of the weapon and warp it with the Perlin noises changes, color changes. And what I do is basically using displacement green channel and multiply it with Perlin noise in order to only target that area of the texture. Displacement G channel is the green part, and Perlin noise is just a noise that changes over time. And whenever you modify that variable displacement channel with Perlin noise changes, you can warp a certain area of any texture basically. And since I have the Perlin noise, I basically add it onto the main color as well. So I have at least some sort of magic kind of thing on the texture as well with the warping itself. What you can also do with this plugin, add colors, different colors to it, and modify those colors real time. Whenever you have the color, make sure you add RGB to it, because our colors are RGBA, which also has alpha channel too. And you can modify the color with the texture to set any color and multiply it, and basically it's like blending on the Photoshop. Another thing that I want to show you is you can use those displacement maps to modify vertices of models. In this case, I go to Blender and paint those areas where I want to move. Um, I'm using blue color in this case because we already use red and green channels, and I will use this texture as a displacement map again on the shader, and this time I will modify the vertices of the model. Whenever you have the displacement texture, you can modify the get vertex function, which can be found in the shader editor again. I didn't use displacement texture on this model because vertices are a little bit like different than I thought, but the idea is here in this video. You can actually use the texture on vertex get vertex function as well. It sets the same textures to the vertices vertex shader as well. And whenever you have this texture, you can also use UV map variable as well. And as you notice that you can like use cosine or sinus functions to move the vertices of the model. You can also use timestamp variables here as well. Anyways, I will share the link of the plugin on GitHub, and let me know if you have any questions.